For 10 years the whole valley agreed on one thing about Caleb Hark. The man was finished. Not dead, worse than dead. Emptied out. They'd say it quiet at the feed store, the way you talk about a horse that had to be put down. Poor cow, never came back from it. And they weren't wrong to think so. I watched him let a good ranch rot fence by fence. I watched him stop answering his door, stop coming to church, stop looking a man in the eye. I watched him nail that barn shut and stand guard over it like it held something he'd killed to protect. We all had our theories about what was in there. Not one of us guessed right. I'm going to tell you what I found the night the roof came down, because I was the one who broke that lock, and I'm the one who has to carry what I saw. It changed how I think about grief. It changed how I think about strength. And it made a liar out of every single person in this town, myself included, who ever said Caleb Hark was broken. He wasn't broken. He was building in the dark for 10 years, and nobody bothered to ask why. Stay with me. The night the barn started to go, I was up anyway, which is the only reason any of this got told at all. I don't sleep good, haven't since Marla passed, and that's going on 9 years now, so I've made my peace with the ceiling. I keep a weather log out of an old habit my daddy drilled into me, temperatures and wind and the look of the sky, entered in a ledger with a stub of pencil I've been meaning to replace since the Reagan administration. That night I'd written wind out of the southwest, hard, smells like the mountains are wet. Then I sat by the window with my coffee gone cold and my dead wife's clock ticking on the mantel, and I watched the storm walk down out of the high country toward Dry Fork like it had somewhere to be. Caleb Hark's place sits maybe half a mile down the county road from mine, close enough that on a still night I can hear his windmill creak. That night the wind was doing the creaking, and under it I heard something else. A crack. Sharp, then a long groan, the sound old timber makes when it's deciding whether or not to give up. I want to tell you I knew right off it was his barn. I didn't. I told myself it was a tree. I'm 71 years old and I've gotten real good at telling myself things. But the groan didn't stop. It went on, that low complaining, and then there was a whump I felt in my back teeth, and I stood up so fast I knocked the cold coffee across my ledger. Out the window, down the road, in the blue dark of the storm, I could see the shape of Cal's barn had changed. Gone lopsided. One corner of the roof had folded in like a man dropping to a knee. Now, I'll be honest with you, because there's no point telling this if I'm going to dress it up. My first thought was not, is Cal all right? My first thought was, finally I'll see what's in there. 10 years of wondering, and the ugly little part of me sat right up like a dog at the dinner table. I'm not proud of that. I'm telling you so you know I'm no better than the rest of them. I just happened to be the one who was awake. I pulled on my boots and my coat, and I got the big flashlight from the truck, and I drove down there with the wind trying to steer me into the ditch the whole way. You have to understand what Cal was before, to understand what 10 years took. When Marla and I moved out here, Lord, 40 years back now, Caleb Hark was the young man everybody's father held up as the example. Not because he was rich, he wasn't, but because he was sound. That's the word my daddy used. A sound man. He worked his own land and half of everybody else's when they needed it. He could set a broken leg on a calf, and he could sing tenor in the church choir, and he could dance, which the women noticed and the men pretended not to. He married Ruth Calloway from over in the next county, and if you ever saw the two of them come into a room, you understood something about luck that the rest of us only got second hand. They fit. Some couples just fit, and there's no earning it and no explaining it, and it isn't fair to the rest of us, but there it is. They had one girl, Nora. I can see her right now, plain as the pencil in my hand. Little thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin, the kind of child who talked to the chickens like they owed her money. She'd come down our road on a fat pony named Biscuit and sit on my fence and tell me the entire plot of whatever picture she'd seen, every scene, both endings if there was a happy one and a sad one, and I'd nod along and Marla would bring out cookies and pretend she'd made them fresh. Nora was 7 the summer the fair came to Dry Fork. I need to tell you about the fair, because everything comes back to the fair, though it took me 10 years to know it. It was one of those traveling outfits, a couple of tired rides and a shooting gallery and a carousel that had seen better decades. Nora had never in her life seen a carousel. She'd seen a picture of one in a book, and she had decided, with the total conviction only a 7-year-old can manage, that riding it was going to be the greatest event of her existence. She'd picked out her horse already from the book, mind you, before she'd even seen the real ones, a white one with a gold mane and roses painted on the saddle. She told everybody. She told me twice. The fair opened on a Friday. Cal promised her they'd go Saturday, once he'd finished the haying, because that's the kind of man he was. He finished his work first. And Friday night a storm came down out of the high country, a storm a lot like the one that was pushing me down the county road 10 years later, and don't think I've ever once missed the rhyme of that. And it dumped 6 inches of rain on Dry Fork in 3 hours and turned the creek into something with teeth. Ruth and Nora were driving back from Ruth's mother's. The low crossing at Coldwater Wash, that everybody in the valley had crossed 10,000 times, was gone under brown water in the dark, and the water was moving faster than a body could believe. And I'm not going to draw it out. It isn't mine to draw out. They found the truck a quarter-mile down. They found Ruth the next morning. They didn't find Nora for 2 days, and Cal was in the search party the whole time, on foot, in the water. And when they found her, it was Cal who carried her out, and no man who saw his face that morning ever fully described it to another living soul. We just don't. Some things you carry for a man by not saying them. The fair had left town by then. The carousel with the white horse and the gold mane rolled off down the highway to the next county over, and Nora never rode it, and that, I think now, though I couldn't have told you then, that was the splinter that never worked its way out. Not the flood. Not even the loss, exactly. It was the smallness of it. A little girl who wanted one ride on a painted horse, and the world couldn't spare her that. You can survive the big cruelties. It's the small ones that finish you. After the funeral, Cal went quiet. Not all at once. The first year, he still came around. He'd help you pull a truck out of the mud. He'd nod at you in town. But the singing was gone, and the light behind his eyes was gone, and he moved like a man walking through water only he could feel. The church ladies brought casseroles until the casseroles stopped being welcome. Preacher Timmons went out to see him more than once and came back saying less each time. The second year, the fences started going. A ranch tells on a man. You can read a fellow's whole inner life in the state of his fences, and Cal's started to sag and gap, and his cattle got down to almost nothing because he wasn't buying and wasn't breeding, just letting the herd wind down like a clock nobody troubled to rewind. By the third year, he'd nailed the barn shut, and it stayed shut. That's when the talk really started, because a man can let his fences go from grief, that we understood. But a man who boards up a whole barn and won't let a living soul near it, that's a man with something to hide, and this valley has never in its history let a good mystery lie in peace. The kinder version was that he kept Ruth and Nora's things in there and couldn't bear to sort them. The unkinder versions I won't repeat, except to say that people who are scared of grief will say almost anything to make it into a story about somebody stranger than themselves. If Cal Hark was just crazy, then what happened to him was crazy people trouble, and it couldn't happen to you. That's the arithmetic of a small town. That's the arithmetic of most people, if you get right down to it. Only Sam ever went in that barn, and Sam never told. I should tell you about Sam, because Sam is the reason I could stand to keep watching the rest of it. Sam Aguilar had worked Cal's place since the two of them were young men, and he was Apache, Chiricahua. On his mother's side from the reservation country to the south, and he'd fetched up in Dry Fork the way people do, following work, and he'd stayed the way people do, following a life. He was a quiet man, quieter even than Cal got later, but it was a different kind of quiet. Cal's quiet was a door shut on an empty room. Sam's quiet was a man who decided most of what got said didn't need saying, and had never once been proven wrong. After the flood, when the other hands drifted off because Cal couldn't pay and couldn't lead, Sam stayed. Didn't ask to be paid. Ran what was left of the cattle himself, mended what fence he could reach, and every few days he'd let himself into that barn and be in there for hours. And when the talk turned to what might be inside, Sam would look at you with those flat, dark, patient eyes and say nothing at all, and somehow the nothing shut you up better than any answer. I asked him once, years back at the feed store, just the two of us at the counter. I said, "Sam, what in the world does Cal do in that barn all day?" And Sam looked at me for a long moment, and I thought he wasn't going to answer, same as always. But then he said something I didn't understand for a decade. He said he's keeping a promise. That's all, he's keeping a promise. Then he loaded his feed and drove off, and I stood there feeling like I'd asked a rude question at a funeral. I understand it now. I'd give a good deal to be able to walk back into that feed store and tell the me of 10 years ago to leave the man alone. But that's not how time works, and if it were, I'd never have written any of this down. So, the storm. The barn folding down on its knee. Me driving the county road with my heart going like a rabbit and the ugly curious dog inside me sitting up. I got there and swung the truck around so the headlights lit the yard. The rain hadn't come yet, just the wind, that hard warm wind that comes ahead of the water, and it was throwing dust and straw across the beams. The whole northwest corner of the barn had caved. A big cottonwood had come down on it. I saw now. A widowmaker branch snapped clean off and driven through the roof like a spear. The rest of the structure was groaning and shifting, deciding. And there was a light inside. A lantern swinging, somebody in there. I ran. 71 years old, and I ran across that yard, hollering Cal's name, and the wind ate the sound. And I got to the man door on the east side, and it was padlocked. Of course it was, 10 years padlocked. I put the flashlight beam on it, and I could see it wasn't going to give to anything I had in my hands. I heard him then, inside, not calling for help, just a sound. A man's voice low, and it took me a second in the roar of the wind to understand he was talking steady and calm, the way you gentle a spooked animal. I found a length of pipe in the bed of my truck, and I came back and I put it through the padlock hasp, and I threw my whole weight and Marla's memory, and every year of my life against it. And the wood of the old door frame let go before the lock did, which is its own little sermon if you want one. I went in with the flashlight up, and I stopped like I'd hit a wall. I have tried 100 times to find the words for the first second of what that flashlight showed me, and I've never gotten it right, and I'm not going to get it right now, but I'm going to try because you're owed the try. Horses. The barn was full of horses. Not living horses, carved ones. Carousel horses, full-sized, the kind you'd ride at a fair, and they were everywhere, ranked around the great open floor of that barn in a circle, rearing and prancing and frozen mid-gallop. Their carved manets flying, and every one of them was painted, and every one was different. And in the swinging light of Cal's lantern and the shaking beam of my flashlight, they seemed for one heart-stopping second to be moving. The whole herd of them, wheeling around the dark like something out of a child's fever. There were 10 of them. And rising up in the center of the barn, half-built, its great beams reaching toward the collapsing roof, was the machine that would turn them. A carousel. A whole carousel, hand-built, out of a dead ranch's timber and a broken man's 10 years, and the storm was bringing the roof down on top of it. Cal was under the fallen corner. He'd been working late, I understood later. He worked at night mostly, always had since the flood, night being kinder to men who can't stand to be looked at, and when the cottonwood came through he'd thrown himself over the nearest of the horses. A white one, a white horse with a gold mane to shield it, and a beam had come down across his legs and pinned him there. And that voice I'd heard, that low, steady gentling, he wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to the horse. "Easy," he was saying when I got to him. "Easy now, I've got you. I've got you, sweetheart, you're all right, you're all right." To a wooden horse, pinned under a beam with his leg bent the wrong way, and the roof coming down, and he was using what he must have thought might be his last breath to comfort a thing carved out of pine. I want to tell you I understood right then. I didn't. I just got my shoulder under that beam. Getting Cal Hark out from under that timber is not a story I can tell straight, on account of I was crying most of the way through it, and a man doesn't narrate his own crying with much accuracy. But here's what mattered. I got the beam up enough. He got his leg free, busted. I could see it was busted, but free. And the whole time I was straining and he was dragging himself, he kept one hand on that white horse, and when I finally hauled him back toward the door and the roof gave one more terrible groan and I said, "Cal, we have to go, the whole thing's coming down," he stopped. He looked back at the 10 horses standing in the dark. And I watched a man make a decision that I have thought about every single day since. There was maybe time to save one. Maybe. The roof was coming, the wind was up, and there was time, if a man moved fast and didn't care what happened to himself, to drag maybe one of those horses out through the door before the corner finished falling. Cal had built 10 years, one a year I'd learn, and any man alive, I think, would have grabbed the white one, the one he'd thrown his body over, the one he'd been comforting, the one that had to be hers, had to be Nora's, the white horse with the gold mane from the book, the one she never got to ride. Cal didn't grab the white horse. He looked at me and his face in the lantern light was streaming and he said, the little one at the end, get the little one. And he pointed to the smallest horse in the circle. A pony, really, painted brown and white. A fat little painted pony with a saddle worn to show it had been climbed on and off of 1,000 times by hands too small to leave any other mark. Biscuit. He'd carved Nora's pony, the fat old pony she used to ride down our road. He'd carved that and put it in the ring with the fair horses, and when the roof was coming down and he could save one thing, he chose not the beautiful one, not the one that stood for what she'd wanted, but the homely one that stood for what she'd had. The ordinary happy thing. The love she'd actually gotten to have. I don't have the philosophy to explain to you why that broke me worse than anything. I just know it did and does. And I got that little painted pony under my arm, and I got Cal's arm over my shoulders, and we went out the door into the wind, as the northwest corner of the barn came down behind us with a sound like the end of the world. We made it to the truck. The rain hit right then, all at once, the way it does out here, a wall of water, and it hammered on the cab while Cal sat in the passenger seat with his ruined leg, and the little painted pony across both our laps because there'd been nowhere else to put it, and he had both hands on it, and he was breathing like a man who'd run a great distance, and he wasn't looking at the barn. I got my breath, I got some part of my mind back. And I said the only true thing I had. I said, "Cal, what is all this?" For a long time he didn't answer, and the rain came down, and I thought he wasn't going to, same as Sam never would, same as 10 years of this valley asking and getting nothing. But something had come loose in him under that beam, or maybe it was just that somebody had finally seen it, finally seen, with his own eyes, the thing Cal had been carrying alone, and a thing seen is a different weight than a thing hidden. I've come to believe that's most of what people need right at the bottom of it, not to be fixed, just to be seen carrying it. He put his hand flat on the little pony's painted flank. And Caleb Hark, who everybody in the valley had agreed for 10 years was broken, turned to me with tears and rain running together down his ruined face, and he started, at last, to talk. He didn't start at the beginning. Grief never does. Grief starts wherever the wound is closest to the skin and works its way out from there, and you learn to just hold still and let it bleed in whatever order it wants. She picked the horse from a book, Cal said. The rain was coming so hard on the cab roof that I had to lean in to hear him, and the little painted pony sat across both our laps, and his hand never once left it the whole time he talked. White one, gold mane, roses on the saddle. She showed me the picture must have been 40 times that book. She'd put her finger right on it, that one, Daddy, When the fair comes, that one." He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "I told her sure. I told her we'll finish the hay first, then we'll go and you can ride it all day if you want. All day. I promised her all day." He looked out at the black shape of the fallen barn through the streaming glass. "You know what a man thinks about," he said, "when he carries his little girl up out of a wash 2 days later. You'd think it'd be the big things. God or fairness or how you'll go on. It wasn't. All I could think over and over, the only thing in my whole head, was she never rode the horse. She wanted one thing, one small thing, and I said finish the hay first. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything. I've learned that much in 71 years. Most of the time, the kindest thing your mouth can do is stay shut and let a man get to the end of it. The first year I just about died myself," he said. "I don't mean I tried anything. I mean I was already mostly gone and I was waiting to finish. Sam kept me fed. I don't remember most of it. There's a stretch in there, months, I couldn't tell you one day from another." He turned the little pony a few degrees, the way you'd adjust something to sit right. "Then one night, must have been near a year on, I couldn't sleep and I went out to the barn and there was Ruth's old cedar chest, the one with Nora's things in it, and I opened it. First time. And on top was that book, the horse book, and it fell open to the page, the white horse page, worn soft right there from her finger." He stopped, started again lower. "And I don't know how to say this so it doesn't sound like a crazy man talking, but I heard her. Not a ghost, I don't mean that, I'm not telling you I saw anything. I mean I heard her the way you hear somebody you loved so long their voice is just in you. And she said, 'That one, Daddy,' same as always. That one." The rain eased just slightly. "Out here it comes in waves." "And I thought," Cal said, "I can't give her the fair. The fair's gone, she's gone. There's not one thing left in this world I can do for my daughter." He drew a breath that shook the whole way in. "Except I could build her the horse. I could build her the whole thing. I couldn't take her to the carousel, but I could make the carousel and I could bring it to her. And every night I worked on it, I'd be with her. In the only place she still was, which was in the middle of doing the thing I'd promised." He looked at me then, straight on, and I understood that this was the part he was most afraid of me hearing. "I know how it sounds," he said. "I know what they say in town, I've always known. And every one of them's right, a grown man carving painted horses in the dark for a dead child, that is crazy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm well. But it was the crazy that kept me alive, mister. It was the only rope in the well. Some men, they'd have had the bottle, some'd have had the gun. I had the horses. That's all. That's the whole ugly secret this valley's been chewing on for 10 years. It's just a father keeping a promise to a little girl who can't hold him to it, because somebody has to. He's keeping a promise. 10 years I'd carried Sam's 4 words around, not understanding them, and there they were, cracked open in a truck cab in the rain. I've never felt so ashamed of a thing I didn't do, of all the times I'd wondered and speculated and let others speculate, when the truth was the plainest, most human thing in the world. A man loved his child. She died wanting one small joy, and he decided that death didn't cancel the debt. That's not madness, or if it is, then the sane thing is worse, and I don't want it." "One a year," I said. It wasn't a question, I'd counted them. 10 horses, 10 years. Cal nodded. "Started with the white one, her one. Took me near the whole first year just to learn how. I'd never carved anything, had to teach myself out of a library book. Sam drove 2 counties to find me. A ghost of something crossed his face. After the white one I couldn't stop, because if there was only the one horse, then someday it'd be done, you see. And then what? Then I'd be finished and she'd be finished and there'd be nothing left to do in the middle of the promise." His voice dropped. "So I kept adding horses. A carousel needs a herd. Long as there was another horse to build, I wasn't done being her father. You understand? Long as it wasn't finished, I wasn't finished." And there it was, the thing under the thing. He hadn't been building a carousel. He'd been building a reason to still be somebody's dad. The little pony last, I thought, Biscuit, the 10th, which meant. "You finished it," I said. "This year you built the last one." Cal was quiet a long moment. "Biscuit was the last horse the ring needed," he said finally. "I built her this spring, and when I set her in the circle, the 10 of them, the machine mostly done," he shook his head slowly. "I stood in that barn and I knew it was near over. A few more months of fitting and it'd turn. It'd actually turn. And I should have been glad 10 years, and instead I was more scared than I'd been since the wash, because I didn't know what a man does the morning after he keeps the last promise he's got." The rain had gone to a soft, steady patter. Somewhere out past the yard, a nightbird started up, fooled by the quiet into thinking it was morning. "And then tonight the tree came down," Cal said, "and I thought, well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe I go with it. Maybe that's cleaner than finding out." He looked down at the pony in his lap, Nora's real pony, the homely fat one she'd actually loved, and his thumb moved over the painted flank like he was brushing off a fly that wasn't there. "But when the beam had me," he said very low, "I didn't think about going with it. I thought about her. I thought, if the barn burns, does she burn too? Which is a mad thing to think about, pine and paint, I know it is, but that's what I thought, and I threw myself over the white horse. And then you came, and there was time for one," and his voice finally broke all the way and he pressed his hand flat to the little pony. "And I couldn't save the fair, mister. I couldn't ever save her the fair. But I could save the thing she actually had. The plain little pony she rode down your road, hollering at your chickens. I could save the love she got to keep, if I couldn't save the one she wanted." He wept then, openly, the way I don't think he'd let himself do in 10 years, and I put my old hand on his shoulder and I let him, and the rain came down, and neither one of us was ashamed. Now, I could end it there, and it'd be a truer ending than most, and if this were a picture, that's where they'd fade it out. But real life doesn't fade out. It keeps on happening the next morning, which is both the cruelty of it and, sometimes, the mercy. Here's what happened the next morning. I drove Cal to the county hospital and they set his leg, and I sat in that waiting room and I made a decision. I've spent my life keeping to myself and letting other folks keep to theirs, and I've generally thought that was a virtue. That morning I decided it had been, at least once, a cowardice, because a man had been drowning half a mile from my door for 10 years, and I'd watched, and I'd wondered, and I'd never once walked down and knocked. So I did a thing I'd never done. I talked. I went to the feed store, which is the town square, the courthouse and the newspaper and the confessional all in one. And when Del Prout asked me had I heard old Hark's barn finally came down, and wasn't it a shame, and what did I reckon was in there, I told him. I told all of them, everything Cal told me. The book, the finger on the page, the promise about the hay, the white horse, the 10 years, 1 horse a year so it'd never be finished, the little painted pony he chose over the beautiful one when the roof came down. I told it plain, and I didn't dress it up, and I didn't spare myself the part where I'd wondered right along with the rest of them. And I watched a whole feed store, full of hard people, go quiet in a way I have only ever seen at gravesides. Del Prout, who I have personally seen argue a widow down over the price of chicken wire, Del Prout turned around and pretended to look at something on a shelf, so we wouldn't see his face. You want to know the truth about a small town, the whole truth and not the mean half I gave you earlier. It's both things at once. It'll gossip a suffering man half to death for 10 years out of fear and small-mindedness. And then, the day it finally understands, it will show up. By the end of that week, there were trucks in Cal Hark's yard. Not to gawk, to work. Somebody told somebody, and that somebody told the church, and Preacher Timmons, who'd been turned away from that door more times than any man alive, stood up on a Sunday and didn't preach about sin. He preached about a father, and by Monday there were men clearing the fallen cottonwood off the barn. And by Wednesday there were more of them than there was work, standing around the way men do, wanting to help and not knowing how, until somebody said it out loud. Let's finish it. Not fix the barn, finish the carousel. Cal came home from the hospital on a Friday, on crutches, to a yard full of pickup trucks in half the valley, and I was there. And I got to watch his face when he came around the corner and saw them all, saw Del Prout up a ladder, and the Kessler boys hauling lumber, and 3 church ladies with paint actual paint, matching the colors off the horses so careful, and Sam Aguilar standing in the middle of it directing traffic with the first open look on his face I'd seen in a decade. And Cal stopped dead on his crutches, and he didn't say a word, and he didn't have to. 10 years he'd carried it alone, because he thought alone was all there was. Turned out the valley had just been waiting to be asked. Turned out we all had. That's the thing nobody tells you about grief, and I'm 71 and I only just learned it myself. It isn't a thing you're supposed to carry alone, and the reason so many people do is that everybody's too scared to knock. Both sides. Him too scared to open the door and us too scared to walk down the road. 10 years over a door nobody would knock on. That's most of the sorrow in this world, if you ask me, not the loss. The door. They rebuilt the barn around the carousel, which I've always thought was exactly right. The shelter growing up around the thing it was meant to shelter. And it took near the whole summer, and Sam and Cal did the fine work, the fitting and the gearing, because it turns out an Apache ranch hand and a broken rancher had figured out more about mechanics in the dark than any of us guessed. And one evening in September, Sam came and found me at my fence, where Nora used to sit, and he said 4 words again, different ones this time. "Come tomorrow," he said, "evening." That's all. Then he drove off, same as always. Some men don't change, and thank God for it. I want to be careful here, at the end, because I could ruin it with too many words, and I've come too far with you to ruin it. The whole valley came. Cal didn't make a speech. Cal has never made a speech in his life and wasn't about to start. He just stood by the machine on his cane now, off the crutches, and Sam threw the switch he'd wired, and there was a groan of gears, the same kind of groan the barn had made coming down, and I felt every one of us flinch at it, and then a catch, and then it turned. 10 hand-carved horses, 10 years of a father's love, wheeling slow around that barn in the gold evening light coming through the new-cut window, and the church ladies had found somewhere an old band organ recording, tinny and sweet, and the music came up, and the horses went round, rising and falling, the white one with the gold mane and the roses and all the others, and the little fat painted pony at the end. Nobody rode it that first turn. Nobody would have dreamed of it. We just stood and watched it go around empty in the gold light, all of us. The whole valley that had called this man broken for 10 years, and there wasn't a dry face in that barn, and the music played, and the horses ran and never got anywhere, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen or ever will. Cal watched the white horse come around, and around. His lips were moving, and I was close enough this time to hear it, the same low gentling from the night of the storm, but the words had changed. He wasn't saying easy anymore. He was saying, "All day, baby, ride it all day." I go down there now, evenings, more than I used to. My old ledger's got fewer weather entries in it and more of the other kind. I'm an old man and I don't sleep good and I never will, but there's a light on down the county road most nights now that isn't a barred-up barn. And sometimes, when the wind's right, I can hear that tinny sweet music start up, and I know Sam's thrown the switch, and I know Cal's standing in the gold, keeping a promise that doesn't have an end anymore because he finally let the rest of us in to help him keep it. They let the children ride it now. Free, always free, Cal won't hear of a dime. The valley kids line up on Sunday afternoons and climb up on the horses with their small hands and they're hollering, and Cal stands off to the side and watches them ride, and I have never once asked him what he sees when he watches, because I know, and some things you carry for a man by not saying them. Last week a little girl, couldn't have been more than 7, dark hair, climbed straight past the beautiful white horse and picked the fat little painted pony at the end. Didn't even look at the others. Went right for the homely one, the way children do, drawn to the plain loved thing without being told. I saw Cal's face when she did it. And I had to go stand out in the yard a while, by myself in the dark, before I could.